Sup you beautiful people. Hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome to part 1 of What If Naruto Was Justice League's Fire Shadow. If you guys enjoy this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel after watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So now let's start this video. The city was beautiful, tall skyscrapers, bright lights, beautiful views, the sounds of life itself as the people moved about. And none of them made any sense to the observer, and for good reason, as this observer in question happened to be not from this world. And at this very moment, he was trying to figure out just what he was going to do now that he was getting into reach of this city. Where in the name of the kami am I? Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki had no idea what he was doing here in this world right now, and while he was still able to remain hidden while he was in the forest outside of the city. Everything that he was looking at right now was something that he had never seen before, and it was something that made the blonde shinobi from Konoha all the more confused by what he was looking at this very moment. The blonde looked about, and the roads were unlike anything he had seen before in his life. The strange metal-looking carts didn't have any horses or people moving them to their destination, and every so often he spotted smoke coming from some sort of pipe that was behind them. There were more of the strange things, and they were of different sizes to boot as he looked at the things carefully, and tried to make some sense of it all. He had seen some things like those in his travels in the elemental countries, as well as his trip to Snow Spring Country, but they were nothing like the ones that he was seeing before him right now. And the buildings in places like Iwa, Konoha, Suna, and several others were tall, but there were no buildings this size in all of his travels at all, and this added even more to the confusion that was hitting the blonde. He however decided that he might as well go back to his place, and try to make some sense on what he was doing here in this world, that seemed to defy just about everything that he knew of. In a nearby clearing in the forest, Naruto sat down in the clearing and managed to calm down and begin to piece together what had happened earlier. He had been on a mission, possibly his last mission for Konoha before he had come here, as he began to think on the events. He learned of a powerful device, a chakra weapon that had been stolen, and was going to be used by a rogue force of ninja, who wished to start a new ninja village, with those who desired to return to the old ways, and meant to attack Konoha itself to bring down the village. He did not wish that, and he placed aside his wandering days to help his village once more. They tracked down the rogue forces, and while he was able to convince some to surrender, the others did not. This forced him to fight and showing his abilities in combat once more, which had not dulled in the slightest even after years of travel around the world. However, the leader, a ninja named Karuta, defied him despite his own respect for Naruto, and revealed that he had activated the weapon already, and soon it would be unleashed on Konoha. The weapon was like a cannon shell, and would instantly destroy Konoha in the same way Pain had done before as it left the base. He would never let that happen after all that he had accomplished and what so many had fought and died for. He intercepted the weapon with the same technique of his father, and managed to use the same jutsu to move the weapon. But it detonated just as he used the jutsu. All he knew was that he had stopped it before it reached Konoha, and all he saw was white, and he thought that he was finally going to die. He was not afraid as he had done everything, and even though the Kyuubi told him to escape, he did not, as he would be able to see his loved ones again. But instead he did not die as soon as the light faded away. And now here he was in a world that made no sense to him in any possible fashion. Naruto knew that staying here was not going to be a good thing, to say the very least. He had to find a good place to hide and gather more information about where he was at this time. Nothing was familiar to him, and there seemed to be a lot of noises and sights, so he had to be careful. The first order of business he had to do was to find some way to blend it, and he doubted that his clothes that he usually wore were going to do him any good in this place that he now happened to be in at this time. With that in mind, he decided to get to using his jutsu. He turned and spotted a man who looked fairly well dressed, and saw that he was able to blend in well enough. With that in mind, Naruto used that technique that he recalled very well. Henge. Once he was done, he went out to see what he could learn from this world that he was in. Thankfully it seemed that the henge was going to be able to do it, and he was soon milling around in the crowds. The people were different than what he was used to, some of them dressed in fashions that he recognized, while the others were completely different as well. There were people who had different complexions and hair color, as well as them speaking in a language that was unknown to the blonde shinobi. This prompted him to do what he could to find out just what sort of language they happened to be speaking in, but there was also a part of him that wished that there was someone who could speak his language. It was not long before he found himself going into an area of this city that seemed a lot different than the ones he had seen, and a lot more familiar. At least familiar to a certain extent as he moved around, and the people looked familiar to him as well. It was here that his nose picked up a very familiar smell. Ramen. Yes. The blonde shinobi quickly homed in on the smell, and sure enough, he was able to see the place of origin of the smell, and saw that well, it was not like the ramen stand he frequented all his life. It had a roomy and calm atmosphere. He opened the door to find that there were only a few customers there, and the cook was a middle-aged but kind-looking woman. The cook turned and gave him a smile and spoke to him, but in the same language as everyone he met. Naruto frowned at that and decided to speak in his language. I can't understand what you are saying. The woman looked at him in surprise and then spoke in a different language, one that he quickly recognized. Oh my. A foreigner who speaks only Japanese. Ha. What do you mean by Japanese? Weeks later. The woman's name was Natsume Oyama, and she was the head chef of this ramen restaurant that her family owned for a number of years in the city that was known as Los Angeles. Her family had moved from their homeland of Japan years before as immigrants. Though Naruto had no idea why they would move away from this Japan place, he was not going to comment until he knew more. He had grown up enough to know that until he got all the needed information, making assumptions was asking for trouble. It took a while before Natsume agreed to hire him as a worker in her place, though this required him to be in henge, though he was able to wear clothes that showed that he worked there. Some of the other workers were not too happy at him coming, but after a few weeks, he became a good friend to them. It made it easier that they spoke the same language, though they did comment on Naruto's dialect on more than one instance. He did give a cover story that his real parents had died while in Japan, and he was raised by his adoptive parents in a mountain village, and only recently had he been able to go to this place in the Yes as it was called. He was here to try and find his birth relatives, as well as rediscover his past identity, but had been so used to living in his mountain village that he was unsure about the customs of the US people. It was all a convenient lie of course, but Naruto knew that it had to be done, even if Konoha, the other hidden villages, or the elemental nations did not exist here. That did not mean he would speak it out. Besides, if Natsume and the others found out that he came from a village of ninjas and all of his past deeds, they would have called him nuts. Natsume was nice enough to help pay him, and explained all that he needed to know about this place called the US, their currency, their customs, and more, though she pointed out that there was more to learn about the land than just from her. That was why she brought him some old books and magazines, and while he disliked reading too many things, the now mature ninja knew better than to scoff at information. He was able to use his Kage Bushin to even up the odds in reading time, and soon learned quite a lot about this land, namely the language which he began to practice along with Natsume and the others in the ramen restaurant. He also learned about these people who called themselves heroes. The most recognized as far as he had seen were these two, the one in the city of Metropolis named Superman and the other from the city of Gotham named Batman. He had to admit that it was strange to see these heroes. Superman was an incredible sight considering what he was able to do with all those powers of his, and the blonde shinobi had no doubt on his mind that if this Superman was in his world, he would have really gotten the attention of the ladies, Ayla Sasuke, and eventually him as well. Still, the man was rather nice, though the incident with this Darkseid character left a bad mark on him. But it seemed that he had spent a great deal of time clearing up his name, something that Naruto could respect, as it mirrored his own efforts in his youth to be freed from the stigma of being the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. That man was similar to a ninja, judging from his garb and the way he moved, even if they were just images. Naruto had seen plenty of ninjas in action on his side, and that of others to know how a ninja moved. That man was certainly living up to the name, but Naruto was sure that there was more to this masked vigilante as he was called by the media. He could see from the face that this man suffered something tragic, possibly when he was young, to have made him become like this. It was reminding him badly of Sasuke, but unlike his former teammate and friend, he has not gone off and killed people for it. Naruto also had to admit that the gadgets he had with him were interesting, and would have really been useful, had they been in Konoha or any of the other villages. After a while, he had earned enough money and learned enough that he bid farewell to Natsume and her family, as well as her staff, and decided to go out and find a place of his own to live in. He knew that he did not have a lot of money with him, so he would have to find another source of income at some point in time. Naruto managed to find it when he was able to compete in a lottery. The luck of the devil that Tsunade had told him that he had was more than enough to make him the lottery well enough, and had allowed him to win a sizable amount of money, just enough for a number of months, and after a while, he was able to find a place to stay. It was a load better than his old apartment, and was more around the lines of the Hokage residence that he called home when he took office. And after getting the place well in his real form, he was able to get some peace, though he knew that he was going to have to find some means of income. Naruto had learned long ago as a kid how important it was to save and use his money well, so he was going to do the same here in this reality that he was in. And already he had an idea on how to put his non-ninja skills to the use of making sure that he had money of his own. A night later, Naruto looked over his apartment and was in his ninja garb, as he now began to call it. He wore his usual style of clothes, and had his red coat on him with the kanji for fire shadow on it. He also wore a mask that was like that of a fox, but had only the lower half of his face shown with his forehead protected there above it as well. The mask was specially made from ceramic, and was chakra reinforced, so it would not be broken easily, and could only be removed if he removed the invisible chakra strings that held it in place. He also happened to have his vest on, and he had his supplies to boot as well if he needed them. On his back were his swords, his supply pouch was on his back, and on his thighs were his kunai holsters, which were naturally loaded. This was going to be the first time that he was going to go into Los Angeles in disguise and his ninja garb as well. He had no doubt that this was going to be different from what he was used to, but he was alright with it, as this was something he was interested in doing ever since he got into the city. The apartment was not too far from the city and was not filled with people, so he doubted that anyone was there to see him, and it was at least 4 stories up without any other building nearby. He might not have any furniture of his own at the moment, but once he found a way to get his own money, that can be solved. With that in mind, he left behind a Kagebushin to manage the place while he was gone, and help make sure that anyone coming around would think that he was not going anywhere and was staying home. As he left the place, he was able to use another addition to his arsenal, which was kunai armed with specially made climbing cable reinforced with chakra. This way he could move about as if moving on ropes, while using his abilities to walk on surfaces once he reached them. Any distance that he could reach with leaping, he was able to tackle well enough while looking around the city while using his chakra to hold on to the surfaces. The blonde had to admit that a place like this was certainly different at night, but he had no doubt that it had its share of troubles. Even Konoha had its share of troubles under his watch, and he had no doubts in his mind that the same could be said for Los Angeles. The crimes that happened here might not be in the same way as those in his reality, but they came fairly close, and Naruto was sure that he was going to run into some of those said crimes soon enough. And he was right on the money, for at the very moment he was in the city, he spotted something, and what he saw was more than enough to get him angry and heading in that direction. In an alleyway. No? Leave me alone. But Pretty Radid was trying to keep away several thugs from getting closer to her. She was trying to keep herself calm at this moment, but she was terrified. Right, had just left her place earlier in the afternoon to pick up some books from her friends. But they had gone to a nearby coffee shop for a drink and some time for themselves, and it was now late in the night that she was going home. Her senses were on alert as she moved through the way, but she was soon able to see the men following her. She was shocked by this and tried to lose them by running and getting home, but they were not going to let her get away. She had no other weapon with her, not even a can of mace or anything, so she ran, but sadly due to her panic, she had made a wrong turn in the alleyways, and now here she was. One of the men grinned lecherously at the young woman, and spoke in a very cocky tone. "Now why would we do that, missy? We're just in the mood for some fun plus some cash if you have any, that is." The young woman reached into her purse and took out the money from her wallet. It was her hard-earned money from her part-time job, and she was saving it all for a chance to find work, and it was hard to part with all of it. But no amount of money was worth her life as she tossed it to them while it was still in the money clip. Once it was there before the thugs, she prayed that they would leave her alone, though she doubted that. "Here. That's all I have, please take it and leave me alone." The leader of the punks took the money and counted it with a grin on his face, and the same could be said for the rest of his followers. But any hope the young Radid had of being left alone was dashed to pieces when they continued to close in on her. The leader took out a wicked knife and spoke to her once more. "Not bad, you've gotten some nice dough on you, now let's see if the rest of you is just as good, eh?" The Radid tried to get away, but her escape was cut off when one of the thugs intercepted her and pushed her back. She fell on the ground and tried to recover herself, and managed to kick away the punk who tried to get to her. He groaned from the kick to his stomach, but he was not deterred by that. He and his buddies had her surrounded and there was no escape for her. They finally got some money and they were now going to have some fun. The lady was very good looking, and had a nice figure to boot. No one was going to save her, not like in Metropolis or Gotham, or anywhere else that had those costumed heroes. Los Angeles had none of their own, and that was good for them in every sense of the word. However, that idea was soon sent down the crapper, as the punk was suddenly stopped dead in his tracks when something suddenly wrapped around him, and before he could ask what was that, he screamed when he was suddenly lifted into the air. The other punks and their intended victim were stunned by that as the group tried to look for their companion with the leader shouting out, "What the fuck happened?" Another punk shouted out, but this time in pain as he was clutching his legs, both of them, and he saw 2 large double-pointed needles in his thighs and his legs were bleeding, but he could not move as he felt himself becoming numb. He however managed to spot something nearby and pointed to the wall. His companions turned to look, but saw nothing. They were able to turn back to their wounded companion, and were about to ask what the hell he was pointing at, but they got their answer when they saw another figure behind their companion, who now dropped face first into the ground unconscious. They were now facing Naruto, who glared darkly at them. The woman was stunned at what she was seeing, and so were the punks until the leader spoke out in a cocky but angry tone. "Who the fuck are you?" Naruto said nothing at first, but then replied, "The name's not important right now. What I am going to do to lowlifes like you and your loser friends is what you should be concerned about." "Oh yeah? You some sort of nutjob in a costume who thinks he can be a hero. What are you going to do to us anyway?" Naruto glared even more and decided to end the taunting and replied, "You guys are so pathetic to actually be ganging up on a woman like this. Were you losers so disgusting that you can't even afford cheap dates?" That infuriated the group of punks, and the leader made that obvious as he struck first. "Shut up. I am going to mess you up right now, freak." "Bad move." Naruto was not impressed. This guy was moving too slow to be even a threat, as he casually dodged the strike from the guy's knife, and he avoided the rest, without moving at all from his current position. He then lashed out with a powerful kick that sent the man flying back and hitting the ground hard and skidding away, until he collided with a trash can. The other punks were stunned by that, and that was the opening that the blonde shinobi was waiting for as he quickly charged in. The punks only saw a brief flash of his yellow hair, as he unleashed a world of pain on them. The punk nearest him was introduced to the blonde's elbow strike to the stomach that sent him crashing down hard in pain. As Naruto used his back as springboard to land 2 kicks into the face of 2 other punks that sent them flying back. One of the punks managed to recover from the shock and tried to blindside the blonde, but got nowhere as Naruto was quickly able to dodge his attacks and appear behind him and land a punch the second he turned to send him down. The blonde evaded another punk armed with a chain, but he caught it and used his strength to yank the guy forward, and used his arm in the same way as Karabi and A did, though he used no chakra element in that attack, as the punk was too weak to use it on to begin with. The man was sent to the ground hard as Naruto quickly flipped forward and introduced his feet to the chin of the next one, as he used his hands to lift himself up like a rocket from the ground. He then lashed out with a spinning kick in mid-air to send another punk flying, as he struck him right at the head. As he landed, he spun around to avoid the next one who was armed with a broken bottle, intent on stabbing him in the back. The full move passed Naruto, and the blonde introduces him to the ground with a sweep kick, followed by an elbow strike to the back of the head. He then turned and introduced a series of finger strikes on the next attacker, hitting in spots he knew would work to stop the man cold, and used full-blown fists on the next attacker, while the first was frozen stiff. The blonde then used his knees to strike at the second attacker, and finished off the 2 of them with powerful kicks that sent them going off to La La Land. The former Konoha Hokage and shinobi looked to see that the punks who attacked him were all out cold. They were all unaware that he had not used his full strength on them, as doing so would have either crippled them or killed them outright, and he was not in the mood for that, since they were not true threats. But a shout of fear got his attention, and he turned to see that the leader had somehow managed to get hold of the young woman, and had his knife by the throat. By now, however, the man was in a panic and tried to find a way out of this mess. "You let me leave right now, or else the bitch gets her throat cut." Naruto glared darkly at the armed man who held the woman by the throat with a knife, and spoke in the coldest tone he could muster. "Harm even an inch of her and your life ends here and now." The thug saw something in the masked man's eyes that told him that this was no idle threat, and that shocked him as he began to feel a great deal of fear in himself. With that fear growing by the second, he finally relented and dropped the knife that he had on the young woman's throat. "Alright man, she's alright, see? Are we cool?" Naruto said nothing, but he reacted as he charged at only a quarter of his already impressive speed, and that was enough as he quickly grabbed the punk, and tossed him over the woman he had held hostage, and smashed him to the ground, while disarming him of the knife. The shock of it was more obvious to the young woman, but Naruto expected that and calmly relaxed himself, as he searched the lead punk, and found the young woman's money. He took that and offered it to her while speaking in his most calm and friendly tone. "Here you are, miss, I believe this is yours." The young woman looked at Naruto, and as soon as she realized that he was not going to harm her, she reached out and took her money. She felt instant relief as she realized she had just been saved from not just being robbed but far worse as well. She broke into tears and nearly collapsed, but Naruto quickly saved her and spoke to her. "Are you alright? I just realized you saved me not from just being robbed, but oh my god, what they could have done before you came along." Naruto said nothing as he allowed the woman to cry so she would get the emotions out. He glared darkly at the punks, and wished he could have really given them a serious beating, but he was not going to do that before a woman who was by rights a civilian. As soon as he felt that she was alright, he turned to her and spoke once more as she wiped away her tears. "You feeling better?" "Yeah, thanks again. I'll call the cops and tell them everything that happened here. Thanks for saving me." "Anytime, miss." "Oh? Sorry about that. My name is Eleanor Riley. Most of my friends call me Ellie for short." "Ellie? Nice name, fits such a pretty lady." Ellie smiled a bit and had to admit that a rescuer felt nice. She watched him move away and to her amazement, began to walk up the walls, as if it was nothing to him at all. She had heard about some heroes being able to do that, but she had never seen it done before in front of her. She then realized that she had not gotten his name. "Wait, who are you?" Naruto turned to face her, and after a moment or two of thinking, he replied, "You can call me Fire Shadow, or in another language, Hokage." With that, Naruto moved up the wall and soon disappeared, and that was enough for Ellie to call the police. He had a lot to tell her parents and friends about what had just happened to her. As for Naruto, he had not gotten too far when he felt his danger senses kick in, and he moved quickly. On the road, the gun battle that was raging in the streets was getting fiercer by the second, as Naruto finally arrived at the sounds that were in the area. He looked to see a number of cars in black and white with flashing blue and red lights. His reading of Natsume's materials told him that these were cars owned by the police, a sort of government-sponsored civilian peacekeeping force, and not part of the military. He saw that their situation was not too good, and while he would have just let them handle it, the sight of several wounded police officers and civilians brought back images of the battles he had been in. The battle with Pain Nagato and the aftermath of the Fourth Shinobi War came back to him, and that was enough to make him move fast. The robbers were armed with high-caliber weapons, and the police were still not able to do much until SWAT arrived, as their weapons were not doing well, since the robbers had high-grade body armor on them. Things looked very grim as several of their comrades and some of the civilians nearby were wounded and paramedics were there, but with the bullets flying about, they couldn't move to help the wounded. This was how bad it was, and the police had a hell of a time trying to keep the media from getting hit as well. They were about to get some help as some of the robbers who were reaching for their clips suddenly were unaware of a strange knife-shaped object land in their group. They were not going to be unaware for long as someone suddenly attacked them from behind. A few of them were sent fleeing backwards, and the others turned to see a strangely dressed guy appear in their midst, and apparently armed with a pair of short knives. They turned to try and deal with him, but they were in for the shock of their lives, as the man moved too fast for them to get a good lock on him. Naruto was not going to let them get a chance, as their weapons reminded him of the kunai spewing weapons of the Sky Ninja that attacked his village a long time ago, though these were a lot more dangerous than those were. Several of the robbers were badly injured as Naruto quickly used his wind chakra to amplify the cutting force of his weapons, and also he used his strength to a slightly higher degree to hit his targets. The kunai's amplified cutting force allowed Naruto to cut through their weapons and body armor, easily wounding them, but not killing them outright, as he wanted to let the police handle that as this was still their job. But if he could keep these robbers from harming more people, then all the better. He then placed aside his kunai and switched to his swords, and with the training he got from his old friend Kurabi, he was doing a very good number on his foes right now. Already the results of the blonde's rescue were obvious, as the paramedics were able to get to the wounded and treat them, while the more critical ones were evacuated when SWAT arrived. The police were not shooting as they were not willing to risk hitting the one who had just came in to help them. And the media themselves were now trying to record what was going on before them, as the new person was helping the police. Naruto himself noted that and decided to end it quickly as he cut through the weapons of his attackers and used his taijutsu to even up the odds in the battle. He placed aside one of his swords and took his special kunai and placed it back as the last of the robbers fell down to the ground, his shotgun cut in half and him out cold. The scene might have seemed peaceful had it not been for the now incoming armored truck that was being driven by one of the robbers. Apparently he and his posse had planned to use the armored truck as an escape method once they were able to take it from the bank's garage, as this bank happened to have one in said garage. He was about to meet up with the other when he spotted from the TV what was going on. And now he apparently wanted to run down the one who had made him and his crew miss out on what would have been a very sweet score that would have been the start of a career, as they would use the money to pay for more powerful weapons and equipment to rob even more banks, not just in law but elsewhere as well in the US, with the exception of the cities that had those cape-wearing heroes in them. And now it was ruined by this new guy, and he planned to reduce the blonde into a pile of bloody mess up to hell roadkill. Not that Naruto was going to let that happen as he placed aside his sword. Naruto glared at the truck driver as he readied his technique to stop the last thief dead in his tracks. He summoned his chakra, and soon formed a sphere of pure energy which surprised just about everyone in the area. He then slammed the Rasengan right into the front of the vehicle, and focused his chakra into his feet to hold him into place. Rasengan. The result was explosive as the Rasengan slammed hard into the vehicle's armored front, and with Naruto's much stronger chakra reserves behind it, and his refined control abilities now at the forefront, it was going to be explosive indeed. The truck stopped with a roar of metal as it was lifted off its feet briefly before the metal buckled hard and began to warp and crack on impact. The vehicle hit the ground as its engine was completely mangled by the impact force alone. The driver was not thrown out of the vehicle due to wearing his seatbelt, but the results were just as surprising for him, as he gasped in horror from the impact force and from the landing, as his vehicle hit the ground, with the armored skin in the front cracked and bent. He didn't have time to react as Naruto moved to the driver's side and used his wind chakra to cut through the door and toss it aside, and he cut him loose from the seatbelt and to the ground to the police. The police and the media looked on in shock as the battle was over, and the blonde shinobi turned and gave them a smile and bowed. He flicked his hand up to a building, and all they saw afterwards was a flash of yellow as the man disappeared. They looked around but found no trace of him, and thus they began to try and piece together what had just happened right in front of them. As for Naruto, he was already a block or two away from the whole scene, as he held his father's Hiroshin kunai in hand. He had learned about it from Kakashi years ago, and after years of hard work and due diligence which Sakura herself had told him he should have when they were kids, he was able to succeed and make his own. It was hard work, but it was worth it, and his old man would have been proud of him as well. He sighed and had a feeling that sooner or later, he was going to be in for the long haul. No doubt the very second the Kyuubi and him talked about it, that demonic fox was going to write his case as Natsume put it once. He moved away from the scene and headed home, just as the night was soon going to be drenched in rain. In the Daily Planet the next day. As the day went on in the Daily Planet, several of the reporters were currently listening into the news, namely that from the City of Angels. The video was from last night and had only one topic in mind. A violent shootout between a number of bank robbers and the LAPD was brought to a swift resolution last night when an unknown figure appeared and fought with the bank robbers. The figure was dressed in black and orange, and wore what appeared to be a short-sleeved long coat of red with black flames, with some sort of Japanese writing on it, which our analysts have translated to mean Fire Shadow, or in this case, Hokage. The images showed Naruto's battles with the thugs, and how he had stopped the truck bearing down on him, much to the interest of the reporters, some of whom included Jimmy Olsen, Angela Chen, and the recently arriving Lois Lane and one Clark Kent. They were all watching as the blonde Hokage's Rasengan smashed the front of the truck hard, and they also watched as he yanked away the door, and had the driver down, as he joined his already unconscious friends. He then used some sort of energy sphere to stop the vehicle cold, and soon faded away before he would be interviewed. So far all attempts to locate this Hokage, as he is no doubt becoming known as, have not succeeded. Though in another story, a young woman named Eleanor Riley had met the Hokage, as she had apparently been saved by the Hokage from a band of thugs who had tried to rob her as well as violate her. He arrived and beat them before things could have escalated, and Miss Riley had only good things to say about the Hokage after he had saved her. As the interview of Riley came to a close as the punks were being arrested by the police, the reporter then spoke. In this reporter's humble opinion, this is a blessing thus far. For years the city of Los Angeles has no superhero or heroine to its people in the same way as Metropolis has Superman, or as Gotham has Batman. Only time will tell how this new addition to the City of Angels would fare, but for today from TV8 News, this is Dana Carmichael bidding you a good day, and to you Hokage, a warm welcome to the City of Angels. Lois smiled a bit and turned to Clark and spoke. Looks like Superman and Batman are not going to be alone. What do you think of this new kid on the block, Smallville? I am not sure yet, Lois, but he's certainly a skilled fighter. Jimmy nodded and replied. Yeah, and he looks rather young, many late teens or early 20s, kind of like Supergirl, I guess. Still, it is kind of good to know that we have a new hero to the ranks. Clark nodded, though he still looked at the image. Who are you? Clark had a feeling that he was not the only one who was asking that very same question as well. No doubt Bruce and the others of his family would be curious as well who this new face was, and no doubt Bruce would be very critical of this new youngster. And Clark had a feeling that he was going to run into this Hokage at some point in time. He was not sure when, but if there was one thing he knew that he could count on, is that his gut feeling was right on the money. The world of heroes has just gotten bigger. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want the next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below, and turn on the bell notification. And also check out other videos that I have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.